So the topic for tonight, it's entitled Be Perfect. It's from chapter 17 of the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism. Our friend Pablo requested that we cover the topic. Now, that's a pretty long chapter, so therefore I would not delve deeply into each section of this chapter. I would simply go over the topics, uh, bringing out its main lesson. And as a result, we should be able to understand very clearly and how we should apply each of these topics into our daily lives. Once again, our main concern is that what we learn in our Spiritist Center, it's something that is applicable to our daily lives and not just, philosophical information that can be useless. It should be something that it should be useful on the following day. So because this is a virtual lecture and I have a feeling that I'm speaking to myself because I don't see you, I don't have an audience, let's use the PowerPoint. It's not something that I like to use most of the lectures, but in order to make sure that you guys are following my arguments, because I don't have any facial cues to follow if you are, then I'm going to use the PowerPoint for tonight. So basically on this chapter, entitled Be Perfect, we have 9 parts to it. And the first part is called the characteristics of perfection. And what is the main lesson to be taken from this first part of chapter 17? Well, the characteristic of perfection, in order for us to know if we are aiming towards perfection, is to expand the range of our capacity to love. And what do I mean by this? Well, when you read this chapter, the first part, characteristics of perfection, the first thing that we learn is that it is impossible to be perfect as God is. That's impossible. Reason being, it's because God is of absolute perfection in everything. And obviously, we, the creation, can never equate our capability to the Creator. So when Christ mentioned that we should be perfect as God is, in no shape or form, he was telling us that this is possible. Of course it's not, because God is absolute, and our perfection will always be relative, and relative to someone who is under us or above us. But it's never absolute, because once again, the creation, the creature can never equate themselves with the Creator themselves. So what is one way that we can tell someone is actually striving to be perfect or is heading towards perfection? Well, that's when they are able to expand the range of their capacity to love. And this is what this section of this chapter is all about. Usually we love people who loves us back. We love our friends who gives us our friendship. We love our relatives who gives us love back. But we very seldom give love to those who are not loving us back, especially those who not only are not giving us love back, they're actually persecuting us or trying to harm us in some way or another. Do we love these people back? So in this chapter, we understand that we are not doing anything out of the ordinary if we love someone who is loving us. What virtue are we practicing when we are returning with love the love we have received back from a friend, from a relative? So therefore, one way that we can tell someone is heading towards perfection, a characteristic of perfection, is if someone is trying to love their enemies. That is one way that we can tell someone is heading towards perfection, to love our enemies. So this is very interesting that this chapter tells us that the characteristic of perfection is actually trying to love our enemy. Now, first of all, what is to love our enemy? very clearly, it's not to have the same emotions that we have for an enemy, the emotions that we have for a friend. And reason being, it's because with a friend, we have trust. There is affinity. We know that we can tell this person our personal business, and a friend will keep that information to themselves. Those things do not happen with an enemy. An enemy is someone that has given us evidence that we shouldn't trust them. Most likely there is no affinity, and then definitely we cannot tell them our personal business. Some of them are out there to harm us. Therefore, it is impossible to have the emotions that we have for a friend towards an enemy. So what is to love our enemy, or to love someone that persecute us? To love our enemy is to wish them good, is to pray for them. And we actually ask the Creator to give this person who have harmed us to open up their consciousness and realize the wrong that they have done. So they have the courage and the awareness, first of all, to improve themselves, and the courage to move forward in their self-transformation. So instead of hating someone who hates us, we will pray for that individual for them to better themselves. But obviously, loving our enemy does not mean we're going to invite them for dinner on the following day, because there is no affinity, there is no trust. So I will love my enemy by praying for their well-being. I'm praying for them to transform themselves, and in order for them to become self-aware of the wrongs they have done, in order for them to repent and move forward with their lives. And that way, I am striving towards perfection. The second part of this chapter, it's entitled Moral Persons. And what is the main lesson from this part of the chapter? Any social position in life is an opportunity to become a better version of ourselves. So this is very interesting. When you read this part of the chapter, Moral Persons, it gives all these different social positions that one can be in, and what is the goal when we are in these social positions. If you are the boss, what is your responsibility towards your employees? If you are the employee, what is your responsibility towards your boss? If you're rich, if you're poor, what is your responsibility when there is someone who is being humiliated in front of you? What is your duty if you are the one who's being humiliated? It gives you all these different social positions that we find ourselves in, and it clearly describes what is our duty when we are in these positions. And what we come to find out is that one can find an opportunity to improve ourselves regardless of the position we find ourselves in. In reality, we find out that our lives, Earth, it's nothing but a big theater, and each one of us is playing a different role. And our job is to play our role the best that we can. Part of this play, the play of life, we are children, and as children, we have certain obligations as parents, and then suddenly we become parents ourselves over time, not suddenly, and then now we have an obligation towards our children. Sometimes we are employees and we have responsibility towards our boss, and then we become the boss, and now we have responsibility toward our employees. And no matter what the position is, we should always ask ourselves the question, if I was the other person, how I would like to be treated? And when I find out the answer to that question, then I will go on to treat those around me just the same way I would like to be treated. Now, this is very straight to the point, very clear, and the gospel is very straight to the point, super clear in the most important aspects of what we're supposed to do. Yet, it is much easier said than done, because when we find ourselves in these different roles in life, we have a tendency to forget what is the main reason we find ourselves in these positions. There's a tendency for us to get consumed with what's happening, and then we lose focus of what is the most important thing, the most important point, the most important reason that we find ourselves in these different roles. And if we keep ourselves aware that the social position we find ourselves in, it's an opportunity for us to develop our intellect and our morality, then we would not lose focus. If we are the child, if we are the parent, if we are the boss, if we are the employee, we will find ways to improve ourselves by doing the best that we can. We understand by reading this chapter, this part of the chapter, that there is always an opportunity for growth, and one can always find a reason to do charity. A lot of people, when they hear the word charity, they limit the definition of charity to almsgiving, giving money, giving clothing, giving food to other people. Yes, that is all very praisable. However, we should not limit the acts of charity by just giving stuff, money, or food or clothes to people, but rather how we treat one another. And most importantly, that we take the initiative of doing the right thing, even though no one around us might not be doing what they ought to do. And therefore, we will be fulfilling our obligation as a moral person in this world. So the next part to this chapter, it's called the Good Spiritists. And the main lesson from the Good Spiritist chapter is, who is a good spiritist? Someone that controls their negative tendencies. This is an excellent chapter. It's considered one of the best chapters written by Allan Kardec from the critics, because he gives a clear definition of what a good spiritist is. And if one is not careful, we think that to be a good spiritist is to be perfect. It's to not have these unpleasant emotions that we call them pride, envy, jealousy, greed, laziness, and so forth. Now, that's not it. Allan Kardec gives us a definition of what a true spiritist is. And that is someone who strives to be a better version today than they were yesterday, and become a better version of themselves tomorrow that they're being today. In other words, constantly progress. It's someone who controls their negative inclinations. Now, to me, from the psychological point of view, and this is my profession, I think that is an outstanding definition of what a good person is. It's someone that controls their negative tendencies. Now, let's just pay attention to reflect upon this, because usually people think that good individuals do not have negative tendencies. Now, that's not it at all. We all have these tendencies that we label them negative because they're part of our evolutionary process. There is a reason that we have jealousy. There is an evolutionary reason why we have pride, why we have greed, why we have envy. These emotions, they were useful for our evolution, and there still are in some extent. The problem becomes when we allow these emotions to shape our behavior. That's when they become problematic, because I can use these emotions in my advantage, because they can tell so much about me. They can bring me a knowledge of decisions I can make if I base my decisions upon them. And because I am aware of these emotions, then I don't make those decisions. Meanwhile, if one pays a little attention to what goes on in everyday life, we'll see that unfortunately a lot of people, they shape their actions by these emotions. And as a result, they get themselves into a lot of trouble and a lot of regret once they find out that they allowed the worst of these emotions to shape their behavior. Now, if we are aware of these emotions and their usefulness in our lives, We will still experience them, but we will not shape our behavior by them, but we still feel them. So for a long time to come, we will still experience envy. We will still experience jealousy. We will still experience laziness. These emotions, we will experience them. However, we don't have to act upon them. We will control our negative inclinations. That is the definition of a good spiritist. I find that to be super beautiful. The fact that to be a true spiritist is someone who is aware and can control their negative inclination. And the reason I say this is because someone who has fallen in love with the spiritist philosophy, they might look at themselves and ask, why in the world do I still think this way? Why am I feeling this way? I study hard, I work, I do my best in order to improve the lives of other people, yet I'm still experiencing these emotions. What's wrong with me? There is nothing wrong with you. This is part of our evolutionary process. We should feel these emotions. What we shouldn't do is to act upon these emotions, to act based on these emotions, because we will definitely regret the things that we will do based on these emotions. We should control them, become aware of their purpose, the amount of knowledge that these emotions bring about us, and we turn ourselves around and we are not influenced by them. Our behaviors are not shaped because we experience these emotions. We are controlling them to the best of our profitability. We will improve ourselves because we are able to control these emotions. That is the definition of a good spiritist. So the next part of this chapter, it's called the parable of the sower. And what is the main take of this part of the chapter, the parable of the sower? The main lesson here is, how do we profit from knowledge? So in this chapter, we read Christ's parable of the sower, and that a sower sowed seeds, and these seeds fell in different places. One of the places, there was nothing to reap from it because it fell on the way. Other parts fell through the rocks, and unfortunately, the rocks did not allow the seed to breathe, and the plants, they grew very little because there was no air, no light. Then there was no crop to be reaped. And then finally, the sower sowed on the proper ground. The ground was fertile, and as a result, people were able to reap crops from 100 to 1, 60 to 1, 30 to 1, and so forth. So Christ finishes his parable by saying, those who have ears to hear, take profit of this lesson. That's the main thing about the parable of the sower, which means that when we hear an information, that information is like a seed. And, the image of a seed is very important, because a seed, it's not yet a tree. It's not yet a plant. A seed is not yet a fruit. It has the potential to become these things. It's not there yet. Now, in order for a seed to transform into a flower, to transform into a plant, to transform into a tree and fruit and so forth, it has to go through a process. If you break a little seed into different pieces, you're not going to see a little branch there. You're not going to see a little fruit there. What you're going to see, it's nothing but a potential to become a seed. As a matter of fact, back in the 1990s, there was a volcano eruption near near a desert in California. This place, about 2 weeks ago, a couple of runners died over there because it's super dry. It's about 1,000 feet below sea level, so the temperatures are super hot. And in the 90s, there was an eruption near the Death Valley, and it changed the weather. And suddenly it began to rain. And for a lot of people's surprise, a couple of weeks after that rain, there were flowers in the Death Valley. And this was incredible. Photographers from all over the world came to take pictures of flowers in the Death Valley. Now the question is, did anyone knew that was going to rain on the Death Valley? Did they went there and planted seeds before the volcano eruption? Well, no. The seeds were already there from a long time ago. But the question is, how come there were never flowers on the Death Valley? Well, that's because the conditions of the Death Valley were not appropriate for a seed to blossom. When those conditions arose, then the seed blossomed, and then we saw flowers. The same thing is with knowledge. At times, you tell someone a very important information. You might tell your child something that they need to do. You tell a friend, in what better ways they can improve their lives so they can bring happiness and avoid misery. And it seems that it's falling in deaf ears, just like that parable of the sower. You sowed seeds, and you sowed seeds on the way. There was no fertile ground for that information to blossom. And other people that you talk to, it seems that they have heard what you said. They make small changes in their lives, but then they don't follow through. This is compatible to the sower sowing seeds onto the rocks. And then you find other people who you sow seeds, and it seems that they take all the information in and they make all the transformation that you're suggesting. They are applying all your suggestions into their everyday lives. But the thing is, a seed, if it's well planted, you always blossom no matter what. So never tire yourself of telling people good information, because that seed will eventually grow. The parable of the sower is more for those who are receiving the seed to reflect upon how they receive information in order for that seed to blossom as soon as possible and not be a seed that was just thrown to the rocks or on the way, but rather it fell on fertile hearts. It fell on a fertile individual who decided to take full advantage to fully profit on that information and become a better version of themselves. But if you are the sower, if you like to throw seeds all around in the process of giving people good information, do not feel discouraged if it seems that your suggestions are falling on deaf ears. Reason being, it's because if you are telling people good information and you don't see anyone transforming themselves before your eyes, your expectation is that people change while you're talking to them. I could guarantee you easily would frustrate yourself, and you'll probably give up on your endeavor to help people. And that's because you do not have control of other people. People will do as they please and not do things to please you. Therefore, your encouragement and your fuel for you to continue to spread the good word should be that you are certain that you're giving good information. What people will do with that information is completely up to their free will. Now it's between that person and the Creator and the supreme intelligence of the universe when that seed will blossom. But the seed one day will blossom. Now, we Spiritists, we are blessed with the Spiritist literature because it tells us so much information about the afterlife. And the Andrea Luiz collection, we see this happening all the time. Sometimes an individual is in the lower zones. This is a place of deep suffering. It's a place of that people are not being punished by God, but rather it's a method of education in which people have used their free will and chose pain in order to move forward, in order to grow, instead of choosing love for themselves. So it's a place similar to the image of the Catholic Church of the purgatory. And that word purgatory comes from the word purge, meaning to get rid of something that is unwanted. So these individuals find themselves in the lower zones. And while they're going through this deep state of suffering, suddenly it comes into their mind the prayer that their mom used to help them to follow through when they were just a child, that prayer before they go to sleep. So here they are in the lower zones, remembering something that happened to them decades ago. And it's the prayer their mom prayed for them before they went to sleep. So that prayer did not fall in deaf ears. Those were seeds deposited in that child's heart. And unfortunately, the child was not mature enough to make use of that seed instantaneously. It waited decades to pass and suffering to come through in order for that seed to finally blossom. So once again, I'm really concerned with this. Do not give up on your endeavors of spreading good news, good message. Just make sure that the information you're passing, it's good information. And eventually, it will be up to that person to make that seed that you deposited in their hearts blossom. The next chapter here of this chapter, the next part to this chapter, it's duty. And what can you take from this part of this chapter? Our duty is to become a better version of ourselves. Now, people constantly ask, what's my mission? I feel that I was born to do something. Well, here's your mission. Your mission is to better yourself, is to become a better version of who you are. I know we are in July, in the middle of the year, but when it's December, especially the 31st, people are preparing for the new year. And once it's midnight, they instinctively say to one another, Happy New Year, Happy New Year, Happy New Year. And here comes January 1st. And if we ask that person, how do they feel? What are they bringing with them from the last year? And it's exactly the same things. They are thinking the same things. They're speaking the same things. They are doing the same things. It begs the question, what is new in this new year? If the individual, it's exactly the same individual. There's nothing new. And, another analogy that I like to use is that when people go into vacation, for example, how do they prepare for that vacation? Well, they put the best clothing, in their luggage. They bring jewelry, all sorts of ornaments in order for them to look their best for this trip. Now, no one in their right mind would actually go to the garbage can, dump all their garbage in their luggage, and take to vacation. And why not? Well, for many reasons. First of all, there is no use to take garbage into our vacation. We don't want to stink. We're going to bother the other passengers. So bringing hatred, bringing animosity from last year to this year, it's actually bringing garbage to a new journey. What is a year? A year is nothing but a journey of 12 months, of 364.25 days. And it's very unwise of individuals to bring their emotional garbage to this new journey. This is why there's nothing new of this new year. And why in the world am I speaking of a new year if we are in July? Well, that's because there are a lot of individuals who have promised themselves that the year 2024 will be a different year for them. Now, we're already halfway there. Is it new? Are we a better version of ourselves? Are we fulfilling our duties? It's interesting that you might know certain people for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And if you talk with this individual's friend and relatives, that person has some sort of a reputation. Maybe they're known to be someone who likes gossiping. Maybe they're someone who is lazy. Now, you know this person for 10, 15, 20 years, and that reputation has remained the same throughout the years. Sometimes you find these individuals even in the religious realms. You find them in church, in mosques, in synagogues, at the Spiritist centers. You know them for all these years, and yet they still have their reputation. It begs the question, what in the world have they been doing all these years in these institutions if they have not improved themselves? Uh, what was the aim achieved? What was the objective that they aimed for and they're still not have achieved? This is something we have to ask ourselves because that is our duty to be a better version of ourselves. So when we leave this flesh, when we leave this current body we are wearing, that would be the question to be asked. You know, am I living this current reincarnation a better version of myself, or am I returning home empty-handed? I have done nothing to improve myself. I have exactly the same reputation because I have not changed. So that is our duty, to change, to become a better version of ourselves. The next part of this chapter talks about virtue. And the emphasis, the take on from this chapter is the definition of pride and modesty. These are very important words to understand, pride and modesty, because if we don't have a clear definition of what they are and how we're supposed to incorporate them in our everyday lives, one can actually further ourselves from improving our lives instead of bettering ourselves. Certain individuals believe that to be modest, to be humble, to have humility, it's actually to dress very poorly, or it's not to have any knowledge, or it's not to be able to communicate, or through verbal or written language. You see this in movies. You see this in when someone refers to a homeless, for example. You might be talking to someone and they point at a homeless person in the street and they will say, look, it's a very humble individual. And why they're saying this person is humble? Because the person is dirty. They have no shoes on. Sometimes they might have just some sandals. And if you approach that individual and you ask them, sir, can I help you? Do you need anything? That person might shout and say, I don't need anyone. Well, that is pride right there. When someone believes that they don't need anyone, that is one of the characteristics of pride, which is far from being humble. What is to be humble? What is to be modest? I could give a whole lecture on this word alone, but to summarize, because we are almost running out of time, to be humble is to be aware of our own self-knowledge. It's to be aware that we don't know. Humble individual, because they are aware that they don't know, they are always seeking knowledge. This is why they're quick to listen to what other people have to say, because they're aware that they don't know everything. They make themselves available to hear what other people might suggest to them. So humble people are always growing because they're learning from other people. They are willing to listen. Proud individuals, on the other hand, arrogant people, they don't think they need anyone. And they think they know everything. And that's a problem right there. Because if I think I know everything, then I stop my growth. And why? Because I'm not listening to anyone. I'm not learning anymore because I think I know everything. Look how much damage pride, arrogance can do in someone else's life, in someone's life. So in this chapter, we learn that to be modest, to be humble, is to be self-aware that we don't know. When we have knowledge of our lack of knowledge, we're always searching for knowledge. If we think we know everything, then there's nothing to learn. And as a result, we do not grow. The next part of this chapter is superiors and subordinates. And the take on this chapter is a different perspective on trials. So we have a tendency to consider that being rich or having power, it's actually a blessing. You hear people saying that all the time, that individual was blessed with wealth, or blessed with power, or blessed with intelligence. Well, when we believe that people are blessed with certain things, it seems that others were not blessed, because not everybody has power, wealth, good looks, intelligence. So it seems, and one can imply, that God is a very partial entity. What does it mean to be partial? God prefers certain individuals over others, because if certain individuals were blessed, it means other individuals were not blessed. Sometimes people use the word gift. This person was born with the gift of intelligence, with the gift of mathematics, with the gift of music. Now, a gift is someone that is given, is something that is given. So it seems, and one can imply, that God gave a gift to that individual, but did not give a gift to other individuals who lack whatever ability that person has. Now, this is very unfair. It's very unjust. And we know that the supreme intelligence of the universe cannot be unfair or unjust. These are human characteristics, not the supreme intelligence characteristics. Therefore, this is definitely a lack of our understanding. So we are not blessed in that sense. Wealth, power, or any other thing that might put us ahead, when we think of opportunities people receive, they are in reality trials. People are born with trials of wealth, trials of being born into a powerful family, or trials of intelligence. Someone has a great intellect. Now, these were not given per se. An intellect is not given. An intellect is the result of someone's previous efforts in different reincarnations for them to have the current intellect or current innate ability, such as a good musician. When they are these child prodigies, they were not given these gifts. They worked for it very hard in previous reincarnations, and what we see now is nothing but the result of their efforts. Now, wealth and power, these are trials that one might receive in order for us to exercise different virtues in the collection of virtues that we must acquire to become a different order of spirits in the hierarchy of our evolution. So one should not be too happy if we have power or wealth, but rather in a constant state of alert. We should never put our guards down if we have these two different trials, power or wealth, because this chapter is about subordinates and people who are superior to the majority. Now, these are positions of trials, and the best way to go through these trials is to not put our guards up, to understand that if we use them towards our self-interest, we will definitely go into fail. We should use wealth and power for the interest of the people around us, to serve the community, to serve others. And we have many great examples in our era, people who are able to amass incredible wealth, and because of that, they are able to generate thousands of jobs. But take, for example, Elon Musk. I believe the last time I checked, this man is responsible for approximately 112,000 jobs. Can you imagine if it wasn't for his efforts to do all the things that he does? 112,000 people wouldn't have the job that they have today. This is definitely uh, uh, someone who has done so much good towards community by providing all these jobs, not to mention all the technological advancements that will help us bring closer to a world of regeneration. And the next part here, next to last, it's the individual in the world. How should we conduct ourselves on a day-to-day basis? That is the main lesson here. Now, the individual in the world means, if the name of the chapter, it's entitled Be Perfect. From a religious perspective, people think that in order to achieve perfection, we should seclude ourselves into some mountain and spend the rest of our lives meditating and praying and worshiping God. So we are not contaminated by being around people full of sin. That is not the case at all. This part of the chapter is very interesting read, because one will find out that we should be in the world, but not do the things of the world, meaning whatever people do that degrade themselves, we shouldn't do it. But we should not stay apart from them either. We should enjoy life without putting ourselves in jeopardy, our moral lives. And we should do our part to be example for the people around us. We should enjoy, once again, what life can bring us, but never to jeopardize our moral growth in the process. You know, sometimes I'm watching TV and I hear this commercial. What happens in Vegas, stay in Vegas. Another name for the city of Vegas is the Sin City, which means I can go there, do whatever crazy thing I want, and whatever I did, the consequences will remain in Vegas. That would be very nice if it was true for a lot of people, but that's not the way life is. Whatever happens in Vegas, we carry with us wherever we go. It doesn't stay in Vegas. So if we compromise our moral well-being with the things that we do while on vacation, that we take with us. It's something that we're doing that it's not contributing to our evolution. And if something is not contributing to our evolution, it's actually contributing to our state of permanence in the same level we find ourselves in. And since we're under the law of progress, it is impossible to remain in the same place forever. So this is where pain will be thrown to us, not as punishment, but as a way to thwart ourselves towards perfection, towards moving ahead. And if we are smart, we definitely want to avoid pain. Instead, we want to choose love, meaning doing the best for us, choosing whatever is best for us in order to move forward. So I'm going to live in the world without belonging to the world. And last but not least, the caring for the body and for the spirit. This is how chapter 17 was closed by Allan Kardec, with this title, Caring for the Body and for the Spirit. And here we learn about spiritual and physical health. In the past, there were sects of Christianity, of individuals who believed that in order to serve God, in order to have a spiritual life, we should completely ignore the needs of our physical body. Now, if we do this, the result would be the shortening of our physical life. And the less time we spend here, the less time we have to evolve. Our goal is to prolong the existence of our physical body, so we are prolonging our chances of evolving by doing good work. So we have a duty not only towards improving our morality, but also we should take care of the machine, this physical machine, our bodies, which gives us the way to do that. So taking care of our health, exercising, eating what is best for this physical machine, it's not something nice that we do. It's a duty that we must fulfill, because those individuals who do not take care of their bodies, when they go through the process of leaving their body, which we call death, they are actually under the label of indirect suicides. These were individuals who did not have the intent to commit suicide, to kill themselves, but they were aware that they were engaged in activities such as eating unhealthy, which would lead them to a premature death. And it is crazy to think that the amount of cancers and heart attacks, these all come from lifestyles, not necessarily from our genetics. It's not our parents or our ancestors to be blamed, but our lifestyle, the things that we put in our body. It is one of the biggest contributor either to the prolonging of our lives or the shortening of our physical existence. So to be perfect, my friends, in a nutshell, is to strive to be a better version of ourselves. But definitely, we will never equate the Creator on its virtues. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Julio. It was great. And I was just thinking how everything that you said was
Here with my speaker.
really tied to what we study